Thank you, Mrs. Clara Lim Tan. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our MHECF 2023 panel discussion. Today, we are unpacking the theme of reimagining pathways, new perspectives, and possibilities in music and the arts. My name is Miss Almira. I am a music teacher from the Arts Education branch, and I will be your moderator for today's panel. So, this afternoon, we have the absolute honor of being joined by four very different professionals working in a range of music and arts-related careers. Going in alphabetical order, we have Clarissa Oon, who is the head of communications and digital content at our National Performing Arts Centre, Esplanade Theatres on the Bay. Prior to joining Esplanade, Clarissa was an arts journalist and critic for many years with the Straits Times. Clarissa, could you give us a wave and a hello? Thank you, Clarissa. Next, we have Josh Wei, who is a Singaporean record producer, songwriter, and managing partner at Snakeweed Studios. Signed to Universal Music Publishing Group at 18 years old, his work's collective stream count exceeds 200 million streams, and his portfolio's roster of artists include names like Kali Uchis, JJ Lin, Stray Kids, Gentle Bones, and Rachel Platten. Josh, if you're around, could you give us a wave too? Maybe we can spotlight him if he's around. Looking around in the background, there he is. Hello, Josh. Okay, I believe we have Shridar Mani with us as well. Pei Ming might be a little late, so I'll move on to Shridar Mani, who is the company manager and co-artistic director of the Opera People, as well as the co-founder and producer of The Public Space, which is an art-centric production house. Over the past 13 years, Shridar has worked at Esplanade Theatres on the Bay, the Arts House Limited, and National Gallery Singapore in the fields of music, dance, theatre, and the literary arts. Shridar, give us another wave. Thank you. All right, so thank you so much, panelists, for taking the time to join us this afternoon. Now, before I hand the time over to our panelists to personally introduce themselves, just a reminder to our students online that if you have a question that you would like to ask throughout the next 1 hour, please post your questions via the Mentimeter, so keep that open. And if you need the QR code to the Mentimeter again, you may scan the QR code that you currently see on the screen, or you can also click on the link that I believe I've just posted in the chat, which is go.gov.sg/MHECF 2023. So be curious, keep those questions coming. But to get us started, I would like to invite each of our panelists to present a 3-minute self-introduction. So let's start with Clarissa from Esplanade. Over to you, Clarissa.
Thanks, Almira. Hi, everyone. I'm Clarissa, glad to be here. So I'm the only non-musician on the panel. My background in school was in theatre and literature. I've always known I wanted to be a writer. I've always felt like the best version of myself somehow is in my words. So I did just that for 17 years at the Straits Times. I mean, that picture you see over there, I was a foreign correspondent based in Beijing, covering China politics. But most of my time at the Straits Times actually was writing about the arts, being a critic, being a theatre reviewer. And then 7 years ago, I made a sort of a switch. I went over to the other side, so to speak, to do communications, marketing, content production for Esplanade, the National Performing Arts Centre, where I handle, comms, content, also our archives of recordings of productions over the last, decade or so at Esplanade. So if you go on to the next slide, some of the stuff that I've written, quite a lot of it actually has been in the area of history, of Singapore's cultural history, and I guess what it says for us on the road ahead. So for example, at Esplanade, we worked on an archival project researching the last 50 years of Singapore's popular music, all the ups and downs, including that kind of lost generation in the 70s, where the government clamped down on English language pop and rock music because it was associated with drug taking. So it's quite fascinating to think of what we lost in that generation. And then, if you move on to the next slide, just to share a bit of some of what I do at Esplanade. So we have a digital platform called Esplanade Offstage. It's kind of like Esplanade's virtual venue and a place where audiences, students, researchers, educators can discover and learn more about the arts through videos, articles, podcasts. We're always on the lookout for writers and content creators. So later on, you can, drop me an email if you're interested. But yeah, some of the podcasts, the articles, videos that we've done for Poplore, which is that series on Singapore popular music, is on Offstage. And I've also been asked to share a little bit about a work of art that inspired me in terms of opening me up to new possibilities, which is basically the theme of this conference. So I'm going to share an example from theatre. I'm not sure if any of you have seen Wild Rice's Hotel, which was staged recently. I thought it was really interesting. It's been restaged a couple of years since 2016, and every time it's been restaged, it's sold out. It kind of goes through 100 years of Singapore history, all in one hotel room. Every scene jumps forward 10 years. But to me, what really stood out for it, I think two things. One is that it's actually a 5-hour epic over 2 nights. It's an occasion in and of itself. And I think in our digitally distracted age, for people to be able to sit with you, to laugh and cry, over multiple nights, that's quite something. It's almost like a throwback, to the days of ancient Greek drama where people sat with these epics in a stadium for days. But there's also a contemporary resonance to it, which I think has a parallel with a similar work, a work of revisionist history like Hamilton, the popular musical that's really, exposed millennials and Gen Zs like yourselves to musical theater, right? It's no longer a fusty art form. But yeah, likewise, I think Hotel as a popular work of art is telling the Singapore story through alternative perspectives, through a multi-ethnic, multilingual, kind of decolonizing perspective that I think is something that to me at least was eye-opening and something new and groundbreaking for theater and the arts in Singapore. So that's my couple of cents for. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Clarissa, for sharing about your work at Straits Times, Esplanade, as well as sharing that the play Hotel was an important piece of art for you in telling not just the Singapore story, but the Singapore stories through multiple perspectives. Thank you. Next up, we have record producer, songwriter, and Snakeweed Studio managing partner, Josh. Take it away, Josh.
Hi, everyone. My name is Josh. I'm a music producer, songwriter, and together with my partner, Leonard Susay, I own a recording studio called Snakeweed Studios. I started playing music. I was classically trained. I did the violin at the age of 5. But, I never really considered it being a career. I think the turning point for me was like I messed up my O-levels. I had never really been good at school, like average at best. And I think at that point, I DSA'd into TJC and I missed it by 1 point. I think at that point I was just really like, look, I want to do something I'm good at and I want to do something I like. So that was the turning point. And then I decided to enroll in Singapore Poly Music and Audio Technology diploma. And I think that point really changed my life. And I decided, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I did that. I played violin in the pop scene now. And I was doing that for a couple of years. I went to Berkeley. I worked in LA as a songwriter and producer. And now I'm back in Singapore. Like they mentioned, I've been fortunate enough to work with artists like Paliuche, Stray Kids, Rachel Platten, JJ Lin, Gentle Bones, Sam Willows. I've also lightly touched on film. I worked on the OST for a Steven Spielberg movie called The Turning. Right now, I'm focused more on 2 things. First is pushing the boundaries of my own music, making sure that, I'm making the best music I can. And secondly, the development and growth of music and art, specifically music in Singapore. So that's me.
Thank you very much, Josh, for sharing your musical journey since you were a kid, playing the violin, working in LA as a songwriter and producer, and now being back in Singapore. All right, let's go on to Shridar. So Shridar, I need to correct myself before I let Shridar speak. He is the performing arts producer at the Opera People as well as the Public Space, yeah? So Shridar, over to you.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Shridar. A lot of how I came to the arts is quite sort of serendipitous and by chance as well. I like Josh. I started music from quite a young age. At that time, it was in Carnatic music. I also, unlike I guess many people my age at the time, had the opportunity to live overseas as a kid for quite a long period of time because when I was in Sec 1, my dad's job transferred him to Tokyo, Japan. So I moved there, and at the middle school there, I had to choose between band and choir. So I decided to choose choir because I was already doing singing. And then subsequently after that, I moved to New York City for high school. So I continued with choir there while also taking voice lessons. And then my teacher introduced me to the opera. And so I used to, at that time, because websites were not so developed, I used to every Saturday morning go to the Metropolitan Opera, which was a 20-minute walk from home, and queue up for 3 hours to get standing room tickets, which at that time were only $15. So I would literally save all my pocket money for the week by bringing food from home so that I could buy the standing room ticket at the end of the week on Saturday, and I would do my homework while queuing up for tickets. And obviously being in New York meant I was also exposed to a lot of Broadway plays and theater shows. My father took me to see a production of Shakespeare's Falstaff that had Kevin Kline and Ethan Hawke in it, which was very memorable. So the performing arts was a big part of my life, but it was not actually something that I considered to be a career at that point. I wanted to be a geoscientist because I thought I could fix climate change, but as we all know, that's unfixable. So I went to university, the University of Chicago, where I pursued a double degree in geophysical sciences and music. Due to various circumstances, one being that I was going crazy and could not handle the workload of doing two majors, but also because in my third year, I received a fellowship with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra to do a long-term archival research project for them involving a Chicago composer. So I spent a year with the organization, not just with one team, but across multiple departments, and I learned how a sort of a large arts organization worked. And after that point, I kind of decided that I wanted to sort of work in the cultural sector and to sort of work in the performing arts. So I came back to Singapore and I started my first job at the Esplanade about 13 years ago as a programmer. Back then, my biggest portfolio actually was doing mostly Indian and traditional cultural programs at the Esplanade, and also some classical music. So I was there for about 7 years. Subsequently, I went to the Arts House and the Singapore International Festival of Arts for 3 years. And lastly, to the National Gallery Singapore for about a year. But through this whole process, I was also doing a lot of my own work. So in 2018, two of my other friends who are singers whom I'd been singing with since I was a kid, we started a company called the Opera People, a Singaporean opera company. Which we kind of created with sort of two aims. One was to create better and more sustainable platforms for Singapore singers to grow and develop, because there were quite a number of us who were studying overseas and with music degrees and coming back and finding that there weren't a lot of performing opportunities available here, especially for singing. So we kind of worked towards that. And the second was also to kind of reshape and redefine opera from being something that was quite sort of seen as quite old and museum-like to something that was quite sort of relevant and responsive to socio-cultural climates and issues. And so we sort of created the company with these two aims. And in 2021, together with another producer friend of mine, Fiza Masnan, we created a company called the Public Space, which is a producing house. And so we work with a number of artists across various platforms and institutions and festivals to produce produce performances and exhibitions and installations, and we both function as independent producers in that capacity. And as the last question, I wanted to quickly share a production I just worked on as part of the Singapore International Festival of Arts 2023 called Pompeii. If I'm able to share my screen.
Yes,
very
you should be
quickly.
able to grab it from us. Yes.
Let me try. No, I'm not able to. It says host disabled participant screen sharing. Sorry.
Okay, maybe you could send the photo to us and we'll share it at the
Sure.
end of the
Or why
panel discussion.
why don't I maybe see if I can drop it in the chat.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Shridar.
In any case, the production I worked on was called Pompeii. It was directed by Edith Podesta. It is a live cinema show, which has never been done in Singapore before, which means that it is a theatre production that is also filmed live, edited live, and projected onto a screen as a film. So it is theatre and film happening simultaneously and created simultaneously. And it was the biggest production I've ever worked on, and was very much a kind of culmination of the last sort of decade and a half of my life. So something I'm very proud of.
Thanks, Shrida. I've just posted a link to the show in the chat for our students to check out. Thank you very much, Shrida, for sharing. I think we'll be talking about this later. And I think you've shared quite a bit about how sometimes when we think about careers, they're not always so linear, right? Like you wanted to be a geoscientist and you had no idea that you would actually end up in the performing arts. So that's also something that we'll talk about later on today. Thanks for that. We're delighted to have with us Dr. Lee Pei Ming joining us. I think it'll be best if I let her introduce herself. So Pei Ming, take it away. Pei Ming, I think you're muted. There we go.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. Well, maybe a short introduction about myself. After I did my A-levels in Singapore, I actually went to the University of Michigan to pursue my bachelor, master's, and as well as doctorate. And the reason why I decided to stay in the university for a longer period of time because Michigan was one of the universities that actually have a combination of performance and pedagogy degrees. And since I was majoring in piano performance, I also enjoyed teaching quite a bit while I was during my education there. And so I decided to pursue a teaching plus performing degree, and I thought that it really worked out very well. When I went overseas to study, it was an eye-opener for me because, well, in Singapore, I think that during that time, I actually achieved my grade 8 and then and my distinction and my diploma shortly after when I was 12 years old. At that time, it was not so common. And so I was kind of like in a big fish in a small pond. And then when I went overseas, it was an eye-opener for me because I was exposed to so many beautiful musicians and pianists. And I became a small fish in a big pond. And it was really quite a rewarding experience watching everyone grow together to learn together. And when I finished my master's, I was actually quite burnt out after studying 6 years consecutively after the A-levels. And I went to Prague master classes, and I actually got a very good experience, and it motivated me to pursue further studies to do a doctorate. And during my years at the doctorate, I was actually exposed to a composer, an American composer called George Crumb. And I think that you can probably see in, maybe the next slide. Yes, yeah, George Crumb. And at that time, I was always exposed to very typical composers like, Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, Haydn, and even when I played Prokofiev, Shostakovich, it was kind of like quite contemporary for me. And I'm always more a traditional kind of person. I like the Baroque, classical, romantic. And when it comes to contemporary, I always felt, a little bit of a resistance. But the experience with George Crumb changed my mindset because I felt that I was able to work with a living composer, and I could actually talk to him, play for him, get his advice and his opinions. And whereas if I were to play something with like Bach's composition or Beethoven, I couldn't talk to all the composers who have already passed away. So it became a really good experience working with a living composer, and I would highly encourage all students to actually try doing that if you have not done so, because you can actually work with on the current piece and you can get feedback from them, and which is great. So it kind of changed my mindset about contemporary music and playing with especially a living composer. But unfortunately, he passed away last year. But it was such a memorable experience, and you know, I even got the score signed by him and to play on his piano. We even had dinner together. So it was all a very good experience, which I would highly encourage. So after my journey at the university, I actually got hired by Yong Siu To as an assistant professor. I was teaching quite a few different classes, pedagogy, communication about music, and theory. And so I was there teaching for 13 years. And actually, I was also, after the 13 years, I decided to go full-time into my own business, which is Staccato Music. And we were very happy that actually starting a music business was never something that came across to me. As a musician, I always like just want to perform, I want to practice, want to teach. You know, starting a business was a totally new experience, and you know, I have to worry about, in some ways worry about, you know, can I sustain the business? Do I get enough sales and revenues? You know, and even at the beginning of the business, I have to worry whether do we have toilet paper in the toilet, you know, things like that. So you know, it's all the experience of running a business that initially was very overwhelming, but subsequently having a good group of teachers and people around me to run the business together, it really helped. Yeah. And also balancing 4 kids, you know, and my eldest being at 4 and my youngest being only 5 years old. So, you know, balancing being a mother of 4 kids, and then, you know, balancing the business as well as, you know, trying to perform and teach. And so all these are something that it was a learning experience for me.
Thank you very much, Pei Ming, for sharing. Now, I'd still like to invite participants to keep asking questions via the Mentimeter. Now, from what we can see, we actually have a panel with quite an array of experiences and backgrounds in music and the arts. And actually, I had a question to start off with, but I realized half the panel had sort of answered this already. And my question was going to be that, you know, most of our participants here are between 15 to 18 years old. And I was going to ask you to think back to when you were teenagers, 15 and 18 years old. And were you thinking about jobs then? And for Shridar's instance, he thought he was going to be A, but in the end, he sort of became B. And for Pei Ming, you've sort of shared about your journey too, and Josh a little bit. But before I choose to skip this question, does any panelists want to expand a little bit more on this question, which was thinking about your teenage years? Were you thinking about a career then? And would your teenage self have ever thought that you'd be in the career you are in now? Maybe just 1 or 2 people might want to respond to that if you haven't already sort of answered this question.
So maybe I'll go. I mean, okay, at 18, I remember I was at Victoria Junior College doing theatre studies. At that time, okay, I'm giving away my age here, but I mean, that was the era of print newspapers, of critics. You know, there were prominent critics writing in the newspaper, like Chris Ho, like Hannah Pandian. Hannah Pandian was the theatre critic of the day, and I mean, Chris Ho is kind of like an indie music legend in and of himself. And okay, so the short answer is yes. In some ways, I'm beyond thrilled that I got to do 2 of my dream jobs, one of which was to become a theatre critic, and the other was which was to work in a National Performing Arts Centre. I mean, I was also in the choir as well. So I mean, you know, theatre, music, I mean, all these are all close to my heart. But I think what is kind of off the charts for me is there are unexpected elements in this mix. Like I never imagined that I would be part of a marketing department, you know, that I would be having to work with data, for example, data analytics, tracking data, that Google Analytics with my friends. So I mean, these are things I've had to learn along the way. And I think what I would tell my 18-year-old self would be, chase your dreams, but also, be prepared to fail and to keep learning constantly.
Thanks, Clarissa, for sharing that and for sharing those words of advice as well. Shridar, I noticed you had your hand up as well. Did you want to answer that?
Yeah, I was just thinking about, I think that even though I sort of I spent those years in America, I think a lot of my perception then was still sort of what would be considered, quote unquote, the conventional careers, right? So, you'd still, it's kind of strange now that when you watch, I watched so many shows when I was a kid, but in my mind was really crossed my mind that, oh, actually everybody involved in this is a professional who has a career in this. Like, you just watch a show. So I think that when for myself at that age, I didn't quite make the connection that this is also a career, because you very much grew up thinking that like a career is like doctor, lawyer, engineer, teacher, those kinds of things. So I think going to university and sort of having a lot of exposure to different pathways, or the possibilities of different pathways, I think then allowed me to sort of naturally gravitate towards the pathway that felt most sort of authentic to who I was, and not trying to be, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Thanks, Shridar, for raising that point that actually there's many things we don't even know that we don't know yet, right? And we don't know what's out there for us. And so all we can really do is to keep learning and keep exposing ourselves and keep attending panels like this or other sorts of events. Now, the question that's sort of been raised is that Clarissa talked about how, she never imagined that she'd be part of the marketing department and dealing with data and analytics. And in a way, there was similar curveballs, so to speak, with Shridar. Now, there is a question I wanted to ask about whether, from your teenage years to now, whether there were any unexpected sort of like curveballs or any unexpected things that you had to learn. And I noticed that there's been a question for Josh in the Mentimeter. And one of our students has asked Josh, they said, Josh, have you ever doubted pursuing this career, especially in Singapore, where it can be difficult to have a steady source of income in the arts? So that's sort of related to what we're talking about in a way, about thinking about, is this the path we want to be on, or doubts about that. Josh, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, sure. I think there was just one point in my life, and I've been doing this professionally now for about 11, 12 years. And in that whole 11 and 12 years, there's probably only been once, like kind of a down period where I did consider quitting. I think this was when I was 20 or 21, so like 3-4 years into it. But like the toughest points, it was because of that I decided to move to LA. So like the toughest points in your career can result in the greatest moves in your career as well. I mean, usually it does if you take it the right way and you don't let it beat you down. So that's what I would say about the first part. And the second part, difficult to have a steady income in the arts. I'll speak for what I do. Even though all of us all the panelists are in music, I think what I do is a little more specific. Everyone does something quite specific. For me, and this is a great question. It's good to address this steady source of income thing. The thing about arts, the thing about music specifically, a lot of people think like, oh, is there money in music? There is money in music. The thing about music industry is that it's a celebrity-driven industry. So that means the money lives in the top 10%. You're either like famous or you're not. You can't really be a little bit famous. Like, it doesn't really work like that in the music industry. You have stars and then you have everyone else. So what it means is that a lot of the money is then driven to the top, and then everyone else is left to struggle. But if you do make it to the top, like I would say, like there's enough money to be made. And the thing about it being steady is, well, maybe this month you make like $30,000, and then the next 2 months you make nothing. I mean, overall you still make money. It's still okay. So I think that's something to consider in terms of the steady. And then that's what I would say about income in the arts, specifically for what I do. Is that the misconception is that there's no money, but the truth is there is money. It just lives at the top, and that creates this misconception that, oh, there's a lack of money. Yeah.
Thanks, Josh, for sharing that insight about the industry. And thank you, whoever it was who asked that question. Actually, on a similar vein, there is someone with a related question, and I would like to pose this to the rest of the panel. So somebody has asked to address to everyone, did you ever feel like giving up, and what motivated you to not give up and keep going? So I believe Josh has in a way answered that, and you've shared about how sometimes it is the down points and those points are actually what might push us into opening new or finding new doors. For Pei Ming, Shridar, and Clarissa, was there ever a point in your career or journey where you felt like giving up, and how did you find motivation to continue? Yeah, Pei Ming, go ahead.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and
Okay,
clear.
great. Okay, thank you. I actually was quite burnt out in the middle of my studies, but I decided to persevere because I thought that having the opportunity to study music was something that not everyone has the chance to do so. And I think that you know, if all of us have that music foundation and we have that interest, you know, we should always strive to pursue, you know, higher opportunities if the opportunity comes. For me, I think that one of the important point where I wanted to give up was actually when it came to running the business, the music business, because I had to balance work life with the children. I had to, you know, be more aware of in terms of the financial. So it was something that I really enjoyed teaching, but was running a business my cup of tea. So that was something that, you know, I was on the verge of like, you know, giving up after 2 years of running a business. But the thing is that when I was teaching and I was also preparing some students for DSA at that point when my students was in the primary 6. And my students actually got into the DSA, into the school they wanted. And it was something that was very rewarding for me. You know, it was something hard work that we did together, and I prepared them for the interviews, the audition process, and, you know, and for them to achieve their dream, to get into their dream school, it was something that was very rewarding. Yeah, so that was something that was very rewarding to me, and, you know, kept me going as a teacher. And then also, but running the business was quite tricky, you know. I have to handle and deal with many parents, and not just students, but parents, you know, and the finances, and also deal with teachers. And so, but I think that for us, we won some awards during the years, and also for my teachers to stay on with the business, you know, to want to stay on for like 8-9 years, or, you know, or 12 years, you know, with me is something that, you know, gives me a sense of confidence. So that was something that I realized, you know, if you have the passion to, and you enjoy doing what you do, like for me, I enjoy the teaching, and, you know, I find that work is no longer work. I enjoy teaching. I don't view it as a form of work. You know, I will be really tired and exhausted at the end of the day, but, you know, I will go home happy. Yeah. So I think that the advice was to, you know, to pursue something that you really enjoy, and you will never feel tired about it.
Thanks, Pei Ming, for not just sharing your journey, but also talking about the importance of joy in the work that you do. Just wondering whether the rest of the panel wanted to say anything about this topic of challenges. Yes, Sridhar, please go ahead.
I'll start with a slightly, I swear it's not a downer statement, but I'll start with a sort of what sounds like a downer statement, which is that I often think of giving up every day. It's not a downer statement, but what I think the sort of the reason for that is that this thing that we do, the hunger for it is sometimes so all consuming that it takes a lot out of me, because I am just, because it's something that is so inseparable from who I am as a person. I'm always giving it 120%. And that is that can be very draining. And on the other side, you see sort of my friends who work in finance, and it's like, at 6:30 they're done for the day and they don't have to think about it at all. Whereas my brain is just, even at 6:30, after 6:30, my brain is constantly running on four gears, thinking about like ideas and next things and everything. So and something that Ko Chien Hong, who is the artistic director of the theatre practice, told me recently. She told me that instead of thinking of sort of tempering or reducing your hunger, think of scaffolding your hunger. Think of building better structures around the hunger to help you sort of move forward and to sort of shape it in the way that is constructive and productive and joyful rather than draining and tiresome. So I think that and I'll sort of reiterate this, which is that, balance is actually really important in a career in the arts, because we do the thing that we love, which also means that we're constantly working, we're constantly thinking about work very often. So I think learning how to find balance, learning how to sort of again structure the drive and the hunger for doing this job is really important. And having really good mentors is also really important. So I think like a lot of the people who were working when I started the industry, and are still working today, really helped shape my thinking, my understanding of the industry, especially in Singapore, which is very different, where it's still sort of things are very different than, in the UK or the US. So I think having good mentors, good people whom you can go to for advice is also something that is a really healthy and useful way of dealing with sort of, of things that come up that make you want to give up. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Sridhar.
think.
Yes, please, Clarissa, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I echo quite a lot of what Shridar has said. I think it's important to find your community, the people who have your back, also people of different skills that you can collaborate with, who can add something, to what you already have. Shridar mentioned the theatre director, Ko Chien Hong. Her father, Ko Pao Kun, once said, "A worthy failure is better than a mediocre success." And I think this should be our attitude towards failure, that sometimes it's really okay to fail. We don't need to fear failure. And I think the last thing for me that has been important is listening, is active listening. And it's something that I did a lot as a journalist, but I never thought about what it might mean to actively listen to feedback about me. And it took time. I mean, sometimes like people say harsh things about you, and it's very hard to deal with, and you want to just give up. But it takes time to process it and to sort of like sift out, okay, what about that is true? There is some truth in that. What can I work on? Versus, what about that is toxic? I think this sort of active listening and processing, which takes time, and you need to give yourself that time. I think that's very important too. Yeah.
Thanks, Clarissa and Shridar, for bringing up that point that sometimes pursuing something we love and that we find so much joy in can, unfortunately, at many times actually burn us out as well, because we give that 110%, and completely appreciate that that advice about how balance is important in doing what we love and to be constructively joyful, or otherwise we might face more burnout. I would like to respect other questions and move on, but I was just wondering whether, Josh, if you had any last words to say about this, because I know you did step into the conversation fairly early.
Very, very quickly. It like for me, I think an ideal place to get in art is, like what Shridar said. Every day, sometimes you can feel like you want to give up. I don't know. It's like a romantic relationship, right? Like it's up and down, but you don't just leave when it's down, and that's how I feel about art. That's how I feel about music. Like I just can't quit. Like, I'm in it already. I can't quit no matter how tough it gets. Like it's at this point, it is what it is. Like I have to figure it out. I'm so tied. My identity is so tied to music. I don't know what else to do. And I think that it's a good place to be at, and it took me quite a while to get there. But I'm there now, and I just wanted to share that perspective with everyone as maybe something to a mindset to prepare yourself for as you get into a career in art.
Thanks, Josh. And I guess it makes us think about, sometimes we love the arts because it makes us feel good when we make music. It makes us feel good when we listen to music. But what about the times when we don't feel good? Does that mean we just stop doing it? I mean, what you've shared is that no, we keep going on, right? And we keep finding those doors that make us go forward. Now, I'm going to move on to a few more other questions. You see, I planned out all these wonderful questions that I wanted to ask, but I realized that our students online are just asking away, which is absolutely fantastic. So just wanted to pause to commend our students. I love that you're also responding via the emojis. We're all very amused. Thank you for laughing along with us virtually. There was a question kind of related. We have talked a little bit about if there's money in the arts briefly with Josh, and I wanted to extend this question because somebody has asked, is music a financially stable career in Singapore? Now, I know the four of you are in quite different jobs, as Josh has already mentioned, but maybe from your own perspective, whether it's in the institution you work at or your own business or the shows that you do, what do you think about this question? Because I think it's a question our students and their parents think about a lot, right? That Shridar mentioned, be a doctor, be a lawyer, where is the viability in being an artist? So does anybody have a response to that? Is music or the arts a financially stable career in Singapore? Yes, Pei Ming, go ahead.
Well, I guess I started off teaching, and I also, I mean, currently, running a business, I have to hire teachers and things like that. And so, to say whether is it a financially stable career, I would say absolutely, because it's an additional tool for you to have. That not everyone have the opportunity to learn an instrument, to be good at it, So, and if you go into teaching, it's something that even if it's not your full-time job, it could be a weekend job. I do have like students, or teachers who are relatively young, and they could be a accountant on the weekdays, and then a music teacher at the weekends, and because they still feel the passion of teaching, even though they may not have the opportunity to to pursue music full time or things like that. So it is a very financially stable career. However, I was going to say, if you are, it really depends on how famous one is. But if you are just trying to earn a living, being a music teacher, I think that is still doable, but it really depends on how much you spend. And how you save and invest and things like that. So it depends on what you expect out from your life and from your career.
Thanks very much, Pei Ming. Anybody else on the panel? And now again, I know the question was, is music a financially stable career? But it could also extend into a question such as, when you think about, a job, whatever job you want to do, think about what you want to do. How much is money on your mind? Yeah, Josh, yes.
Yeah, I think I should add on to this. Within music, there are paths that are more stable than others. For example, if you're a teacher, for example, if you're in marketing, or maybe you're in music marketing at Universal or a record label, there are paths that are stable. Like if you play in the SSO, it's stable, right? There are going to be paths that are stable, and then there are paths which are essentially not stable. They're the high risk, high reward paths. Like if you want to be an artist, if you want to be a songwriter, if you want to be a producer. And what I will say, like very clearly, is if you're just starting out as an artist, songwriter, and producer, and you have not made it, you will 100% be broke. Like 100% you will be broke. So there is no money in that at the start. And you have to like pay your dues, you have to work your way up. And it's very, very important I feel like I should be very clear about this. But like I said, in that segment of the music industry, it's the famous ones are famous, and a lot of the money is at the top, and then everyone else is just going along and struggling until they reach that point. So it's up to you. It's your risk tolerance. It's up to you whether you want to play this game. It's up to you whether you feel like so strongly led to be an artist, a producer, a songwriter, whatever. But yes, there is different segments within the music industries, of some of which are stable and then some of which are more high risk, high reward. Yeah.
Thanks, Josh, for reminding us that there is a whole range of musical jobs and musical experiences, and they are all very different depending on what you do. Thanks for that. Clarissa, Shridar, anything to add in this area about money and
Yeah, maybe just to jump on to what Josh just talked about. So for example, I'm about to go to opera rehearsal tonight at 7, and the reason why it's at 7 p.m. is because all of the professional singers who are in our show, most of them are teachers. Like their day job is they teach at various music schools or music institutions like SOTA or NAFA or YST, Yong Siew To Conservatory of Music during the day. So we have rehearsals at night so that they can still sort of earn their sort of daily wage and then come for rehearsals and do the singing that they really want to do. So like Josh said, the pathway may not be the most sort of may not be the path of least resistance, but it is possible. And you just have to accept that a lot of hustle and a lot of sort of finding the opportunities that you can when you can, and sort of really sort of working on them is really very much a part of the job at the industry. I want to just quickly sort of pivot. I know we're talking about music, but to talk about sort of an aspirational thing, which is that in the theater industry, things have actually moved along quite differently, and that many professional actors in Singapore are actually paid a more commensurate kind of wage. So rehearsals are structured by hours. They get paid a per call or per hour rate, to the point where actually an actor who is working on a production over a month is able to actually make a relatively sustainable wage by working on one show for a period of time. So one of the aspirations that I have is that, especially in the classical music industry, is for us to be able to sort of inch our way up towards that goal, in which we are sort of able to pay a musician or a singer equitably for an engagement for a production over a period of time. But as a quite nascent industry, we are still working out sort of a lot of the mechanics and a lot of the systems of how this works and how this is structured. So it might take some time, but by the time you guys are professional musicians, maybe we will have these structures in place. So actually, you guys will benefit from a lot of the work that that we are doing to help put these systems into place.
Thanks, Shridar. You make me think of another question, which is related to a student's question. But before that, Clarissa, anything you wanted to add? No? Okay. Then, because you were talking about, Shridar, you were talking about your aspirations for your field. I mean, one of them is a more sustainable way of earning a living, right? As compared to perhaps the theatre scene. Someone in the chat has asked a question specifically to Shridar, but I think we can expand this to all of you. So the question for Shridar was, what do you think about the Indian music scene in Singapore? I think since they heard that you worked for the Indian music festivals, Indian arts festivals in Esplanade. And how do you think we can push for more representation of the minority community and arts in Singapore? Yeah.
This is a very complicated question, and I'm not sure I can myself do it the justice it deserves. So I saw this question in the screenshot, and so I just wanted to sort of like firstly preface by saying that I do think that in Singapore the word community has a particular connotation, a particular association which I'm not very fond of. There is a general sense that when people talk about community arts, that it means something that is lesser, or something that is not high art, or something that's for the masses. I just want to make it very clear that in no way is any art form sort of lesser of any kind, and that Goethe is not less valuable than Chopin. That I just want to sort of make that kind of thing very clear, that all art forms contain deeply intrinsic knowledge and cultural value that has to be, that we have to sort of, as Clarissa said, decolonize, because we have been very much trained and raised in a particular system that has put certain forms on a pedestal, largely because we have inherited those forms from people who came before us. I just want to make that very clear, that that value is not determined by the origin of an art form. So that's one thing. The second thing is, I think that I would say like the easiest or sort of the most sweeping statement I can make about this is to insert yourself into as many things as possible. I think one of the reasons why minority forms or work doesn't get the representation or visibility it sort of deserves is because that it's sometimes still very much cloistered in certain institutions that are generally away from the more mass appeal public eye. I think that the more and I also bear some of the responsibility of this, which is that the more we can expand sorry, and before I say that, the other thing I want to say is that I think also because we come from Singapore is very small, we just have this one city. There's no like other cities you can tour to or other cities that have other companies. We only have this one city, and therefore the natural instinct is for us to build boundaries and fences around the institutions and the art forms that we have, so that we say that this is like my turf and this is your turf, and you stay there and I'll stay here, and we'll just sort of do our thing. I think that the way that we can have more representation across the board is by tearing down the fences and sort of constantly intruding ourselves into each other's turf and constantly allowing for engaged dialogue and engaged experimentation and across various forms, and discovering sort of what are the possibilities of bringing things together rather than what are the conveniences of keeping things apart, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Shridar, for actually expanding that question into making us think about more fundamental issues and more fundamental themes. I'm also mindful that I want to hear from the other panelists, and I know this question was addressed to Shridar. The bigger question I want to draw out from this is, for the other three, for Clarissa, Josh, and Pei Ming, what are your own aspirations for your respective fields? What are the gaps that you see, and where do you hope to see your field by the time our students who are 15 to 18, by the time they are old enough to start, entering your respective fields? What are the gaps, and where do you hope to see the fields you're in now to be a better place from where it is currently? Yeah. And in the meantime, while you ponder that, I do acknowledge that there is a student from Nanyang Girls, Lim Jie Ting. If you would still like to ask your question, I see your hand is raised. Do hang on. We'll pull you in a minute after this, okay? Yeah. Yes, Josh.
Okay. Yeah. Specifically for me, again, I do pop music in Singapore, and specifically mainly English pop music. I think that the industry is still so much in its infancy, and the infrastructure is quite underdeveloped right now. It's still developing. I think what I hope to see is that I hope to see us being able to be better songwriters, to be better producers. It's all in the creative mind. A lot of how open your mind is based on the artistic exposure and development you had when you were young. And a lot of times I look at myself and my peers and I think like, maybe this is it. Maybe we can push some more. But if we had the opportunities when we were younger, I think our starting point would have been so much more. And that's why I'm such a huge supporter of anything that the MOE wants to do with music. And I mean that. The developmental years are so important. So, what I hope to see is like, better songs being written, better productions being made. And not just that, let's not forget like the marketing side, the management side for music. These are all very, very, you make a good song, who's going to sell it? You need the infrastructure. I hope to see Singaporean kids saying like, oh, I want to be a manager, like I want to be in music marketing, and I want to push the boundaries in those fields. And I think if everyone starts coming together to be excellent at what they do, because it's a global game. When you put a song out on Spotify, it's not a Singapore release anymore. There's no such thing. It's a global release. I think for us to have the skill set and the passion and the grit to play at a global level is really what I hope to see for my field.
Thank you, Josh. And now, before I let you go, I just wanted to pick your brains a bit. You said that you hope to see better songwriters and better producers. Now, what exactly do you mean by better? Do you mean technically? Do you mean, what does that look like?
I mean, to be very, very direct and to answer this question, if I take our best song that Singapore has produced, and we can just go by statistics, if we take our highest streaming song and compare it with the highest streaming song in the US or in the UK or in the world or in honestly in wherever. Again, like I'm speaking for English music because that's what I primarily do. The fact is it's just not as good. Like it's not as good. The melodies don't lift the same way the melodies do for a song that has 3 billion streams. It just doesn't. The lyrics are not as deep or relatable. I think deepness and it being relatable is something that has to be so in sync. It cannot just be deep and unrelatable. It cannot just be relatable and have no depth. Just the quality of songs have to go up, and that's something I really hope to see. So what I meant by that was really as bluntly as it sounds, like the quality that does have to increase. But I believe it can, and I believe it will.
Thanks, Josh, and we appreciate your candor and your honesty as well in sharing that with us. Mindful of time, I'll move on to the others. So Clarissa, go ahead. Aspirations for your field.
Yeah. So I have a number of interrelated sort of fields, both in my professional and personal hats. To start with, maybe marketing. I mean, in the area of arts marketing, music marketing. I think I'm optimistic in this area because like what Josh said, there are more students coming out of arts management programs who students with an arts background who would choose maybe to go into marketing rather than being creative practitioners, but have that knowledge of the arts and the acumen, the business side of things to put two and two together, to be able to market more creatively, imaginatively. I think that I can see a lot of things coming together, a lot of momentum for that. Another area that I'm in is sort of arts archival or documentation. In this area, I think the performing arts is a little bit behind, say, the museums. Because museums work with material objects, so it's much easier to document an entire collection versus performing arts with live recordings. But I think for the Esplanade Offstage platform, we want to be in a position in 2 years' time where we're not just showing recording, we're not just showing like documentary videos, articles, behind the scenes podcasts, but also where you can watch performances, archival recordings of performances, and from there like be exposed to like rich documentation of what is essentially very ephemeral. I mean, a concert is over in a night, but it can live on digitally in this way. So I mean, we're pushing on in this area. There's quite a lot of work to be done, but it's also ongoing. But the last area, the one which I feel maybe the most heavy-hearted about, really, I think is criticism, arts criticism, music criticism. I think the problem in this area is the lack of a sustainable business model for paying critical platforms, because writers and critics need something to sustain their craft, right? If not, they'll just drop out and go into another industry, and then they'll kind of lose touch. But what is that model in the digital space for critics to continue, and in this way, feed their insights into the growth and development of artists? So this is the one area, I feel like I'm not sure. It's a big question mark, and I hope that there will be more creative ways, more possible ways to monetize criticism in the months and years to come. Yeah.
Thanks, Clarissa. Pei Ming, if you could summarize in 2 minutes what your aspirations are for your field, what would you say there?
Sure. I'll try to speak fast. Okay, I think that the generation now, and actually we are all very fortunate to have all the good facilities like Yong Shu To, Esplanade, a lot of concert venues out there. So at the time 20 years ago, there were not so many of them. So I think that we are very fortunate to have the facilities, but we need more people to go to concerts, classical concert especially. Now, I don't think it's about, sometimes it's not about financial, because looking at the ticket sales for Jackie Chung, Taylor Swift, people are willing, even school children are willing to pay hundreds, or even parents are willing to pay thousands of dollars to attend a concert. But when it comes to like classical concert, I think, so far this year, only the young 10 years old Mikao was able to have a sold out concert, at Esplanade Esplanade Concert Hall. And so I feel that, well, not many people may want to spend so much money, on something that they may not be so passionate about, maybe classical music. So maybe something that the government can help to do is that if, let's say, some concerts that are not so full, they may be able to subsidize and give tickets free to school children to help, to encourage them to attend more concerts. That is one thing I would like to see more, students attending concerts in Singapore. The other thing is that I would like to see a much higher teaching level abilities of teachers. We do have, when it comes to hiring of teachers, we do have a lot of like grade 8 graduates, diploma graduates, and who wants to try teaching. While I may encourage, most students to try to teach as much as they can to gain more teaching experience before they actually go into a full-time job, but a lot of, parents are like, they want higher, credential teachers and things like that. So, I think that there needs to be a platform for local teachers who wants to, to really nurture that patience and the love for teaching, and not just like to earn the extra money kind of thing. Yeah, and to give them more support to be more world-class performer, and more opportunities, and really to see what people would like to learn, in order to reach out to more people to want to pursue music lessons. So to increase the ability for teachers in general.
Thanks, Pei Ming, and thanks, panel, for answering that question that I didn't prepare you to answer. I haven't forgotten about you. Where are you? Student from Nanyang Girls, have you disappeared? I don't see your hand raised anymore. Is your hand raised? Oh, okay, maybe we answered her question, who knows? Okay, well, we only have, I believe we have to end at 4:05 and it's already 4:02. I had tons of questions. I know there's many of you who have been posting so many questions on the Mentimeter and we cannot answer them all today. Not to worry, later on, I believe the panel is happy to share an email address that you don't spam, but you can contact them if you do have pressing questions. But perhaps since we have 3 minutes left, I would like to hog the time to ask my own question to close things. So the last question for today's panel discussion would be a bit of a more practical one. I think panel has touched on this a little bit, but let's go into a bit more. So if a young person in this Zoom today would like to do exactly what you are doing, whether it's being a journalist, being working at Esplanade specifically, being a music producer, songwriter, artistic director, arts educator, piano teacher, if they want to do what you do, what are some essential steps or skill sets or mindsets that they can focus now as a teenager now to help prepare them for this journey? Of course, there's going to be twists and turns, but what would you say are some practical ways that they can start now? Yeah, I mean, anybody can go first.
Okay, I'll go very quickly.
Yeah.
For me specifically, this is personal and general opinion. Obviously, everyone's situation is different, but maybe this can be a guide. I think if you want to do music, specifically what I do, or be an artist as a career, there are two typical paths you can go on right now. So this is really immediate next steps. You can either go higher education for music, that means poly or uni, just higher education for music, or you can start working immediately. I would say even if you go to higher education for music, you still should start working immediately. Basically, you should start working as soon as you can, because what school offers you is a protection. You can be broke during school, but it's much harder to be broke once you're out of school. So you should always start working as soon as you can. I think unless you're already established and well-connected, I would really recommend going higher education first. And if things pop off, you can always drop out. So higher education is a good path to go to protect yourself. And then I would say the immediate steps to think about is, what do you want to do specifically? It's not good enough to say, I want to be in music. Like, do you want to be a songwriter? Do you want to be a producer? Do you want to be an artist? They're very, very different things. And if you're not sure, school's a great place to find out, because they'll let you try everything. And once you realize what you're good at, you have to zone in and like hone in on your craft and be really, really good at it. Because like we talked about, it's really only the top 10% that are going to make money from this. So you have to make sure you're at that level. And that means you have to get good at it. Yeah, that's what I would say in regards to immediate next steps.
Thanks very much, Josh. Anybody else want to go? Clarissa?
So, I mean, very quickly, if you're interested in marketing and communications, in an arts organization, in an arts company, I think the fastest way into it, I'm assuming that you already have some kind of a background in an art form, is to layer over that with a course, or I mean, it can be a tertiary course, it can be, you know, some kind of short course in communications or in marketing. If you are interested in more on the content creation, writing side of things, then actually it's a bit more open-ended, because there are courses ranging from creative writing to video content production that you can dive into. Yeah, I think that it's important to kind of follow your heart and marry that with your skills also, to see where that takes you. Yeah.
Thanks, Clarissa. Shridar?
Just again, building off all of that, I think a big thing I would say is, again, everything said, like, definitely think about, you know, what are the right tertiary programs that would help to sort of like, help you go further along the path to your course. But I think a big thing for me is really get involved, like volunteer to be front of house, volunteer to do backstage, volunteer to all the things, because like, if you want to go into sort of the more programming and producing, and it's really like, you need to know how this sort of beast mechanism of performing a performance happens. And the best way to do that is to just like get involved backstage or get involved front of house. And, you know, like, companies are always looking for volunteers to help them out, because we are always short of resources or manpower. So there's no harm in just writing to a company and saying, hey, I'm available for holidays for 3 months. Like, is there anything I can do? Chances are you will definitely hit someone who will say, oh my God, yes, I need help for this. So please, can you come? Can you start tomorrow? Yeah.
Thanks, Shridar, for that. Pei Ming, last but not least.
Yes, I just have 3 quick points. The first one is, I agree with Josh and Shridar saying, you know, about working experience. For me, when I'm hiring people, teachers, especially, it's not really like, oh, whether you have a doctorate or master's or bachelor. Sometimes I look at their work experience. You know, you can be the best performer, but you don't know how to teach at all, or you can be the best teacher, but you don't know how to perform as well. So, but to me, the teaching experience really counts. So, you know, don't wait till you graduate then start looking for even a part-time job. You know, it's great to start teaching, to start having all kinds of exposure. That's the first point. The second point is, when you go for a job interview, please don't be too picky. Why do I say that? I have people coming in, can you teach on the weekends, because music school are the busiest, and they're like, oh, okay, Sunday 2 to 4, okay, Saturday 9 to 11 only, you know. So I'm like, oh my goodness, you know, you're already telling me what time you can make it, but you know, the job is not even offered to you yet. So don't be too picky. Keep your options more open. And the third point is, have integrity. I do have people, like, for example, you know, teachers who came in to teach, and then they end up taking the students as their own private students, you know. And so you know, have integrity, because, you know, once you get into the job, you have that responsibility, yeah, to, you know, to do a good job teaching. And, you know, if you decided not to teach, you know, that's, or students would like to, you know, or you like to go to the student's house to teach, you know, always have a chat with the boss, you know, and things like that. So have an open communication.
Thank you, Pei Ming, and thank you all 4 of you for the wonderfully rich panel discussion. Unfortunately, it's 4:09. That's all the time we have for you today. Before I close, just two things. Number one, a little quick summary. So today, we've not just learned about the different types of possible careers or pathways in the arts and in music in Singapore and abroad. Not just that, we've also learned that looking at careers and jobs is not linear at all, and there are twists and turns everywhere you go. And so just to be open to that, but at the same time to prepare yourself. It's never too early, and you're never too old either to think about where you want to be in the future. We've also, as we've closed, we've also started talking about that the best way to start is to get started now, get your hands dirty. If you think you like doing something, start straight away, and maybe you'll get more clarity on that as you go along. Now that's number one. Number two, we are going to take a group photo. Yes, so can I invite the panelists to give us your biggest smiles as we take a kind of a sad screenshot? Okay, is someone taking a photo? All right, here we go. 1, 2, smile. Thank you very much for the rounds of applause and emojis I see from our students. Love the enthusiasm. Okay, if I know you all have questions that have not been answered, we will post the email addresses of our 4 panelists in the chat. So again, please do not spam them. Think very carefully about questions that you would like to ask, and if it's really very pressing, they have so kindly given us their email addresses, and whether they reply to you or not is perhaps another thing. Yeah, so may we once again, could we we've come to the end of our panel discussion, and could we put our hands together for a silent round of applause for our 4 panelists, Clarissa Oon, Josh Wei, Pei Ming, and Shridar Mani. All right, thank you very much for all of you. I will now pass the time back to our host for this afternoon, Miss Lee. Thank you very much.